101.5 FM in the morning. This is Waking Up. I'm Juliana Forlano.
With King Downing. Good morning. Good morning.
Everybody right here in the studio on the show. Hopefully, if the trains run properly, Charles Lentner is coming on to talk about the big fight between Bernie supporters and Warren supporters and why it doesn't need to be there. We're also going to be speaking in the second half of the program with Richard McLachlan of Extinction Rebellion about understanding this climate crisis we're living in, not just letting the news tell you, but letting the people who are really fighting it tell you. It's a lovely day. Stay with us. Welcome to the program, everybody. Happy Wednesday morning. It's already Wednesday.
I know it feels like Tuesday.
It feels a lot like Tuesday, which is great because pretty soon
it'll be Friday.
I don't know. Why do we all hate our jobs? What if somebody works on the weekend? Oh, yeah. Oh, it's 68 degrees going up to 90 today. 89 degrees. That's kind of crazy. I had no idea what to wear. Can't wear white. Can't wear, it's a little confusing. But hey, that's the least of our problems. Hurricane Dorian is still menacing the southeast coast. It is closing in on Georgia and the north of Florida. It is at a category 2 at this moment. So, anywho, that's where we're at with that. We're keeping our eyes on we're good. I'm good. No, we're not good. This? Okay, we're switching stuff around here. Check it out. If you're watching on the live stream, you're getting a live view of technology in action here on WBAI. Okay, so, I guess when Charles gets here, we'll all have to cozy up to the one mic.
Nice.
Maybe he forgot to come. I'm going to give him, I know a lot of people from act.tv are... if they're watching, they know Charles, and so they're looking forward to seeing him. And anyone who's listening will get a major kick out of him. He works for the Real News Network, and he is also the executive director of Organizing 2.0. So he basically helps labor to organize. Isn't that exciting? That sounds like an interesting person to talk to. But before we get to that, let's hit the news. Carrie Lam, Hong Kong's chief executive, said on Wednesday that she was withdrawing that contentious extradition bill that set off those months and months of protest you are seeing in Hong Kong, moving to quell those, worst political crisis since the former British colony returned to the Chinese 22 years ago. Anyway, this move eliminates the major objection among the protesters, but it's unclear if it would be enough to bring an end to those intensifying demonstrations, which are now driven by multiple grievances with the government. Sort of like when you have a fight with your beloved, you're like, if you could just take the trash out, and remember when we got married, how you didn't put the flowers on the table? And then you just bring up everything instead of sticking to the one. But hey, I'm sure they have a number of grievances there. Lam suspended the bill in June and later said that it was dead, but demonstrators have long been suspicious of her government's refusal to formally withdraw that bill and feared it could be revived at a later date. Withdrawal of the bill, which would allow extradition to mainland China, has remained at the top of the list of protesters' demands, but the list has grown to include an independent investigation into the police response, amnesty for arrested protesters, and direct elections for all lawmakers and the chief executive, which are a good list of demands. We shall see. The Pentagon announced yesterday it will divert my guess is that, I'm sorry to cut in here, but my guess is that it's starting to hit the pocketbook of the, businesses in Hong Kong. If you can't fly in and you can't fly out, and those folks, this is a pitchforks moment. Professor Wolf always talks about when people rise up with the pitchforks. It doesn't take too long until it starts hitting the pocketbook of the corporations, and then demands can be, seen as an economic impetus. So, unfortunately, we have to follow the money. But hey, anyway, the Pentagon announced yesterday it will divert $3.6 billion in military construction funds to build Trump's border wall. Shortly after, the American Civil Liberties Union announced it would seek a court order blocking the use of funds as part of its lawsuit challenging the president's abuse of emergency powers to secure funds for that wall that Congress denied. Our very own Chuck Schumer New York senator extraordinaire, kind of, said about the decision, "It's a slap in the face to the members of the armed forces who serve our country that President Trump is willing to cannibalize already allocated military funding to boost his own ego." Schumer said that the lost funding would delay critical construction projects at military installations in New York, such as the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. An interesting argument. We need to build up the military, and therefore we can't build the wall.
Yeah, I don't think that's the best argument for our listeners.
No, definitely not. But maybe, again, if Schumer can get the military on the side of not building the wall instead of building the wall, it's a good PR thing. What are they going to build in, West Point? A new library.
An army.
Good one. In Brexit news yesterday, British lawmakers took the unprecedented step of usurping government control of Parliament. Yay. The United Kingdom's House of Commons voted by a majority of 27 on the motion that will allow MPs to vote on legislation that would force a Brexit delay. The immediate goal of stopping British Prime Minister Boris Johnson from taking the country out of the EU without a formal deal to manage that departure. Yike. Traditionally, when a British Prime Minister loses their ability to win votes in Parliament, they are ejected via a no-confidence vote, or they call for an early election to decide their fate. Johnson's preference is for an election on October 15th, hoping that his Conservative Party will gain seats in the House of Commons. And now...
Remove yourselves from your prostate positions. Did I say that right? I've got to
Prostate
practice.
positions.
Prostrate
Not on.
positions. Yeah. So, interesting day yesterday. The City Planning Commission had its vote on whether to approve the Rikers Island plan, and the agenda was going to be pretty mild. Each one was going to speak for a moment, and then they were going to cast their vote. But it turned out that there were a large group of people there who were not only unhappy with the vote, but decided to shout it down. And so there were a group of very vocal abolitionists who blocked what they had a chance to say. And in fact, we couldn't even hear the vote until afterwards, when I went up to gather some sound from Daniel Capelli, who is one of the commissioners.
Is this what he said?
That's when I finally learned.
I'm not going to take this anymore.
No, I think that was part of the audience.
That was the other people.
That was the audience. But it's interesting because there's a kind of a split among the abolitionists, because there are some abolitionists who don't want anything to move forward, and then there are other abolitionists who say that shutting Rikers down should be a priority, and we've got to move forward with this plan because no matter what, there are going to be people left over that have to be put somewhere. So it's interesting. But any rate, they voted 9-3 to approve it, and now it goes to the City Council, who is going to have hearings 2 days from now, and then they have 50 days to approve or disapprove the plan.
Now, not to talk inside baseball, but that is what we're going to talk with Charles Lynchner, inside baseball. How much do you believe that de Blasio's running for president has to do with, do you think he's putting pressure on the city council, or are they functioning independently of him? It would certainly look good if New York shuts down Rikers for his candidacy across the country.
Well,
He hasn't pulled out yet, as it turns out.
No.
Only Gillibrand's out.
Well, he's getting a lot of national headlines. But is there any chance we can listen to 30 seconds of what Capelli said?
Sure. Do we have it somewhere?
Yeah.
There are prisons already located in most of these locations. So, the question is that you want to have borough-based jails so that families can visit their loved ones who are incarcerated and not have them have to travel across. Getting to Rikers is an enormous undertaking.
And the only reason I'm not normally, running after commissioners and trying to get their story, but we were at the hearing and we couldn't hear any of what they had to say. So I just wanted to give folks a little taste of the position of one of them, who, by the way, is a defense lawyer. And he feels that it'll make it easier for him to get to his clients and make it easier for families to visit. So those were his arguments.
So it makes it easier on people who have not committed a crime or have been accused of a crime.
Yeah, and it also makes it easier for people who've been accused, because I've taken my guidance from the people who have been incarcerated, and some of them talk about having to get up at 4 a.m, to get there to be in court, being packed into the pens, not able to see their lawyer until 15 minutes before, because the lawyers aren't going to go out to Rikers Island, and then finding out that they missed the date. It took so long, so they take the bus all the way back, and by 4 in the afternoon or 5 or 6, they're back there to wait another month for their next court date. So the stories there are crazy, including the violence and the lack of air conditioning, the lack of programs, the lack of health care, being on a toxic site. So.
Did they lose heat also? Remember the prison in Sunset Park lost heat this past winter during a freezing cold snap.
That has happened there.
Yeah.
So.
Insane.
So we'll see what happens tomorrow. We urge everybody to go out, whatever side you're on. Make some noise.
So I don't know if you heard about this one, but CNN is holding a September 4th town hall on climate policy at the studios right here. I know CNN's all over the place, but they are at 30 Hudson Yards. A group of folks are getting together. Who are the organizers of this, Alana? Do you know?
It's Food and Water Watch, isn't it?
Food and Water Watch are getting together.
We might be able to get someone on the air if I call them.
Oh, well, let's see if we can do
Try
it.
and do that?
No, that's okay. We'll see what happens. We are waiting for Charles, and we're going to publicly shame him but for not being here. But we have other stuff we want to get to anyway, so that's okay. We'll give him the buffer of... Alana, were you able to catch him on the phone? No. So we left a message and we texted. This is the problem with having live in-studio guests when your show is at 7 o'clock in the morning. But thank God we still have King. When I was a little late myself today, and when... I was like, King's probably already there. Okay. Well, anyway, that town hall is tonight. So get out there if you can. They're going to be greeting 10 candidates with signs and chants demanding really strong climate policies of all of them. And they're going to use this opportunity to tell the world about the global youth strike for climate, which is happening on September 20th. Of course, we'll be covering that on our show here. But, you know, the world doesn't necessarily know. You can bring signs indicating what you want the candidates to commit to and how you want the media to cover this issue. They are asking folks to join today from 3 to 5:30 p.m. at 33rd Street between 10th and 11th Avenues. You could take the 7 to 34th Street, but everybody knows how to get to 34th Street. Like all trains lead to 34.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we brought some sound back from the event where de Blasio was over there, and I spoke to a young high school student, a Latinx high school student, who said that he felt he wasn't let in because he had to write down what questions he would ask. And once he said he was going to ask about the Pantaleo case, the Eric Garner officer who killed him, he believes he was not let in for that. So they may be saying, bring your signs outside, but if you plan to go in and ask questions, you might think about what you want to say you plan to ask. Just say, hey, what a great job the candidates are doing.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Oh, you're listening to Waking Up. I'm Juliana Forlano in the studio.
King Downing,
my hero today. I won't mention why, but something weird happened when we first came in the building, something unusual, and King came to the rescue. Just having a tall black man come out and be like, hi, just kind of, everybody backs off. Everybody backs up.
It was another version of a message from the king.
It wasn't. I know. I wish I had the music with me. Unusual. All right, 67 degrees out, going up to 89 degrees, and a little bit cloudy today. This afternoon, we're looking at a 40% chance of some rain. This looks like the most beautiful weather forecast, given what's happening, in Florida. Tomorrow it's going to 78 and 66 and partly sunny, like the perfect day. And Friday, it's supposed to rain. 50% chance of rain. Saturday, according to this, says 79 degrees and sunny. Sunday, 80 degrees and partly sunny. I don't know what happened. The last I checked, the hurricane was going to wash out the weekend. This was last night before going to bed. Now it says it's sunny. So don't make any plans and just live your life in chaos. You're listening to Waking Up. We'll be right back after this musical break.
Hello, I'm from the government with an important message as we enter the third decade of the 21st century. Things are going, fine. Overall, the Amazon is fine, half of Africa is fine, so is the Arctic, Indonesia, Spain, Greece, even Greenland's on fucking fire. I mean fine. Scientists have coined a new term for this stage of climate change we're entering. We're fucked. Unlike the previous stage, which climate scientists called listen to us or we might be fucked, we're fucked is happening and in your lifetime. This is thanks to us wasting decades piss-farting around at climate summits with non-binding emission targets, whilst handing out subsidies to climate criminals obstructing renewables, and generally not giving a shit that rising CO2 levels are about to trigger what scientists call feedback loops. A feedback loop is the scientific term for when a species uses its own ignorance to screw itself and everything else around it so hard that its own planet tells it to git fo. Some people are already experiencing we're fucked, such as these Pacific nations facing rising sea levels, who recently begged Australia to please stop burning coal, to which Australia responded, get fucked. The combination of we're fucked and get fucked will cause wars to break out over access to food and water, except in America, where the chosen one will just nuke hunger. Would you like to know more? But please don't panic. If the realization that we're fucked troubles you, why not ride a bike to work, have shorter showers, or send thoughts and prayers? Just don't join the global climate strike this September or Extinction Rebellion in October, because a sustained collective movement would force us to take drastic action and turn this ship around, which might just be doable if enough of you demand it. Or you could go to Area 51 and demand to see the aliens, in which case, we're definitely fucked. This has been a message from your local government franchise, authorized by the Department for Going Gentle into that good night.
You're listening to Waking Up. We're like a cat. We adjust. We land on our feet. Our guest, who I'm going to publicly shame now, Charles Lynchner. I've known him so well for such a long time. I'm sure he's okay. He's probably stuck in the C train or something like that. But in his stead, we are very happy to have, and at this very early hour, Eric Weltman, Senior Organizer for Food and Water Watch. Eric, thanks for joining us on this last second availability. I really appreciate it.
Totally fine. And I know Charles as well, having met him in Israel, of all places, years ago.
Yes.
And I can attest he is definitely a Trotskyite.
I love it. So
Good one.
Talk about the action that's coming up today and what you think about how CNN is doing these climate change town halls.
Sure. So Food and Water Watch, Food and Water Action is teaming up with a host of organizations, a lot of our traditional allies like New York Communities for Change, the People's Climate Movement, and Sane Energy Project, as well as some wonderful allies in the labor movement. We've got SAIU 1199 and the New York State Nurses Association. We're all going to be gathering outside of CNN studios this afternoon to hold a little rally as CNN is hosting 10 Democratic candidates for president to discuss climate change.
What about the other 10? Are they just like there's no hope on climate change, those 10, or what?
I I don't
How'd they
know.
pick
We had
these 10?
nothing to do. Is it only 20 candidates at this point?
Only, yes, we've pared it down by 3.
And I wouldn't. And by the way, I wouldn't be surprised if a few more jumped in at some point.
Yeah,
but,
me too. They just you got to wait it out until it's down to 4, and then you say, you know what, maybe I could help.
Exactly.
That's what I'm going to do.
We are. We're going to have hundreds of people gathered outside at 30 Hudson Yards in Manhattan this afternoon.
Excellent.
Calling on the presidential candidates to endorse extremely bold climate change policies, which embraces some very, very specific and urgent actions.
Talk about those.
A ban on fracking, which
Yay.
is, folks probably know, we managed to do so here in New York, but we need to do nationwide. A ban on new fossil fuel infrastructure, so no more pipelines and power plants that transport and burn fossil fuels. A just and rapid transition to 100% renewable energy. A ban on the export of fossil fuels. So a lot of very specific things that we really need the next president, whoever it may be, whoever she or he may be, to embrace.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. How do you think? Do you think you will be getting media attention? Say that you are right outside CNN when Bill de Blasio was approached by people who, he was going to be speaking on CNN in one of their town hall debates, and he was approached by young people who were upset about his inaction on the Eric Garner case. That made national media. I'm hoping that happens with you as well. Do you have any thoughts and plans around that?
Yeah, so this is a rather unusual event in that it's not a debate; it's a town hall, so it's going to be a very long event. We're certainly not going to be there the entire time.
It's like 8 hours long. I don't even know how we're going to cover it.
Yeah, no, I know.
Highlights.
I mean, we're going to
Some
have
poor soul is going to watch all 8 hours, get the clips, and then we're going to play them.
I mean, Food and Water Watch and Food and Water Action, we're going to be live tweeting throughout the event. So if folks don't want to watch the whole thing, they can get some of the highlights, I guess, on Twitter or social media.
That's good. We'll
but
send Alana right to Food and Water Watch to get those clips, and
Yeah.
then we can play them tomorrow.
It's hard to imagine anyone watching the entire thing. But I mean, I will note though that at this point we've been very impressed with Bernie Sanders' plan in terms of both its scope and level of ambition. And
how does he stand out
certainly
from the rest of the candidates in terms of his
Well,
plan?
again, it really is in terms of breadth and depth, in terms of being economy-wide and not just embracing a transition around electricity generation, which is in some ways sort of the low-hanging fruit. But his plan is economy-wide, embraces agricultural production, which is an enormous source of methane emissions. It embraces transportation, it embraces manufacturing. So its scope is very broad. And in its level of boldness and ambition, again, he calls for a ban on fracking, a ban on fossil fuel infrastructure. So he's addressing not just the demand side, so to speak. I mean, a lot of the candidates are embracing a transition to renewable energy, but Bernie's plan also addresses the production side, which, as I've said, repeatedly, and because it is so important, that we need to ban the production of new fossil fuels. We need to ban fracking. We need to, stop drilling on public lands. We need to stop the construction of new pipelines and power plants like the proposed Williams pipeline here in New York. I mean, I mentioned that Governor Cuomo had taken the initiative after, I guess you might say, years and years of prodding of banning fracking. But here in New York and obviously elsewhere, we're still facing an onslaught of fossil fuel and fracking infrastructure, including the Williams pipeline, a number of power plants upstate that would burn frack gas. So it's not just the fracking, the drilling itself, but it's the infrastructure as well that we need to not just ban, but start to close down.
Eric, when I've been talking to people who are working on the issue of climate change, I always bring up that climate change isn't the only environmental problem that we have. Will Food and Water Watch be, making demands around other issues? Say, there's so many: clean water, deforestation, clean air.
Yeah, so Food and Water Watch actually has an organizer on the ground in Iowa, which, as folks know, is the first, not primary state, but I guess caucus state, and we have a fairly broad and bold agenda, I guess you might say, around agriculture. So that's one of our big concerns is really corporate control and abuse of not just our energy system, but our food and water system.
Are we talking about killing the bees with the pesticides?
We're talking about that. We're talking about factory farms, which, as I mentioned, is a major source of methane, but also water pollution. So really, Food and Water Watch and Food and Water Action, our C4 political arm, really we take, I think, a systematic approach to these problems, which is looking at how corporations are, dictating not just what's produced, but how it's produced.
So Eric, I was going to try to cross-pollinate, and I just realized, no pun intended.
Oh, wait a minute.
that was not intentional. So the idea is that we might be in favor of one type of pipeline, and that's the pipelines that would replace the pipes that are in cities like Newark, where lead is being leached out and people are being poisoned. And I know that Food and Water Watch has taken a position on that. But what would we expect a presidential candidate to do? Because the only chain of responsibility in this case has gone mostly to the mayor, and then it's crept up to the governor. But nobody has talked about the Fed stepping in and doing anything.
A lot of it is about money. And I will say that you're absolutely right that part of any Green New Deal needs to be, reinvesting in our nation's, water infrastructure. You absolutely nailed it. We're not against occasionally I have to say we're not against pipelines. We're water pipelines. So you absolutely nailed it. A Green New Deal needs to embrace fully funding our nation's public water infrastructure, because again, that's one of our concerns is avoiding privatization, private control of our water systems.
Will Cory Booker be on this thing? Because maybe somebody can pummel him with a question about how he wanted to privatize the water as a way to, quote unquote, keep it clean. It's a town hall. Are there going to be actually people standing up and asking questions? And can we muscle our way in there under the guise of being, not a radical?
So, to be honest, I was actually late last night, to my surprise, I received an invitation from CNN to attend the town hall.
Oh, my God, I hope you're going.
I am planning on going. It's supposed to last until midnight.
Get that coffee. So our wake-up call to you was, slightly intrusive to your plan.
No, I'd already gotten up and gone to the gym. So
wow.
Yeah.
I just started doing some push-ups before. See my guns? You can look on the...
And not only that, we're also hosting a sleepover with my son and two of his friends. So it's quite
yeah. How old is your son? Just if you
he's
don't.
12. He turned 12 on Sunday, and school starts tomorrow. So this is like the last big hurrah.
Sure. So it's calm at your place. It's all.
But I do want to
serenity.
mention. I'm glad you brought up water, because that obviously is part of our name, and we do have legislation that Bernie Sanders, it happens, has introduced in the Senate called the Water Act. And it's an acronym for something, I can't remember what. But it was really supersized federal investment in water infrastructure, which has been declining since the 70s. I think it actually reached its height under the Nixon and Carter administrations, of all things. But in the last few decades, it's been declining under really every president, Democrat and Republican. And that's one of the reasons why we have these problems in Flint and in Newark and in Baltimore with the water shutoffs. I mean, it's not just dirty water that we're contending with, but it's unaffordable water. You have communities like in Baltimore where people have had to face a choice of between buying their food and buying their water.
Right.
So we really need the federal government to step up once again and create, really thousands, if not millions, of good green jobs by investing in clean energy and safe water.
How can people get involved in Food and Water Watch? And have you seen an uptick in membership as our Earth crumbles before us?
Absolutely. We've got an office in downtown Brooklyn, 32 Court Street. Folks are welcome to come by if they want to pay a visit.
Maybe we'll come over and do some live coverage of. I want to see the stuff you have hanging on the walls. That's always my favorite, an activist place.
What was the address again? Could you say the address?
32 Court Street. And by the way,
Court.
I love your office too. I mean,
Don't tell anyone where it is. We we just had a thing. Everyone's
okay.
fine. Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right.
But
I won't
yeah.
mention where it is.
But you're welcome anytime.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I love. I mean, we love BAI, and I'm.
Well,
whenever-
I'm on JK's mailing list, and whenever she puts something out, we announce it. We try to get folks on, so I'm really, we announce pretty much everything she does on those Mondays. We announce on the show, and then we ask people to make those
is one
calls.
of our favorite allies with Sane Energy Project, another grassroots ally of ours, and I do want to acknowledge again that we're working with some amazing groups, 350 Brooklyn. 350 NYC, all amazing chapters of the national or international 350.org, Surfrider, a lot of great organizations that have been fighting the Williams Pipeline and other frac gas infrastructure. And thankfully we have this opportunity today and tonight to really put the pressure on the presidential candidates. As folks may know, we've been doing a lot of work targeting Governor Cuomo to stop the Williams Pipeline and other frac gas infrastructure. And this, being here in New York, obviously, Food and Water Watch and Food and Water Action and our allies can take it up a notch.
Yeah, so get on over there from 3 to 5:30 p.m. It's at 33rd Street between 10th and 11th Avenue. That's 34th Street and Hudson. That's pretty much where it is. It's at the Hudson Yards. So you'll probably potentially be inside, Eric, but I'm going to tell people if they're listening that you will give them a warm welcome when you see them show up with their signs and whatnot.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you so much for being on the program. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us on.
You're welcome. You're listening to Waking Up. I'm Juliana Forlano in the studio.
King Downing, good morning.
This is WBAI 99.5 AM. I'm really enjoying this kind of off-the-cuff random show. Perhaps we should not plan any of our shows ever.
Well, with the start we had, no wonder the adrenaline is so high. So we're just flying through this show.
And we planned.
Yeah,
best made plans. What do they say? If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Okay, I'll write that one down.
You don't know that one?
Okay, no,
That's a good one.
That.
I got slogans. All right, we'll be back after this musical break with our next guest. We hope. We don't know. We'll see.
You have sort of asked people to stop referring to it as Japanese internment camps, which is certainly how I had learned it.
We all speak English.
It's a misnomer.
Well, Japanese internment camp, according to grammar, will lead you to think that they were run by the Japanese government. We were American citizens of Japanese ancestry, ordered by the President of the United States to be imprisoned in the United States, in our case, Arkansas, and guarded over by the U.S. military. They were American concentration camps for Americans of Japanese ancestry. We were in Japanese American internment camps, but the press always, for the last 75 years, have been referring to those camps as Japanese internment camps, and it drove me up the wall every time I hear it.
And, it's hard not to draw a parallel to what's happening now. How hard is it for you to see what's happening to families at the border right now, thinking that maybe what had happened to you was part of American history as opposed to American present?
It is a parallel, but it's a new low, because we as children were always together with our parents. We were never separated, and our parents protected us from the reality that was surrounding us. What we have on the southern borders now is a grotesque new low. Children being torn away from their parents, infants torn away, put in filthy, disgusting cages with human waste in it. I mean, children, and to really underscore the evil in this, some of them are scattered to the far reaches of the United States from the southern border, Minnesota, Wisconsin, New Jersey. I mean, intentional cruelty, evil. And when the courts order them to bring the children and the parents together, they are so incompetent that they can't find the right child or the parents to put them together. It is an American tragedy and an American disgrace.
You're listening to Waking Up on 99.5 FM. It is going to be 89 degrees outside, 67 currently. Whoop, 68. Cloudy. A little bit of rain this afternoon is what they're saying. So basically everything. It's cooler now. It's going to be really hot later. And then it's sunny now, going to be cloudy, and then a little bit rainy later. So, be prepared for any contingency. I think snow is probably out of the question. So you can leave those, my knockoff Uggs. I can leave those. All right, we often talk about the climate crisis on Waking Up like we just did. But in order to fight for the earth, we really need to understand what's going on. I've had people call and ask me to make sure that it's tangible as much as possible, like what is going to happen to our food, what is going to happen, what is happening, et cetera, et cetera. And today on Waking Up, Extinction Rebellion member Richard McLachlan is going to outline these basic mechanics of the greenhouse effect and talk about the dramatic and ongoing rise of carbon dioxide emissions, and how Extinction Rebellion plans to disrupt business as usual to prevent a climate catastrophe. Richard, thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much, Juliana. I'm happy to be here.
I love the fact that you are a grandfather of 5, and can you talk about how it moves you internally having children to do this work? I was already doing this work, then I had a child, and I was like, oh, this is a real emergency. Somehow when it was just me, it didn't seem to be such an emergency, but now it seems a little bit more present.
Yeah. Well, that really had a huge impact on me, and there were 2 things, really. The first one was that just over a year ago, my first ever granddaughter was born. And
wait a minute, you had all 5 in a year? Nice timing.
No.
Nice.
I was a child bride. I had the first one when I was 22, and I'm now 67. So no, it's been
so
a long
you've had time.
I've had a long life of children and then grandchildren. But what I hope is the last grandchild, and not so long before that, her older brother. This happened in the midst of the sort of final realization that this was a catastrophe that we were looking at. This wasn't something called environmental problems or even climate change. It was a global climate catastrophe. And I looked at these small children and thought, oh my God, their lives are going to be so much more difficult and painful than mine or many people's ever were. And
it's also
filled me with the deepest sadness.
It's impossible to prepare them. I mean, I'm reading her books about animals that are on the brink of extinction. It's like, oh, look at the tiger. Oh, look at the elephant. It's quite painful as a parent.
It really is. And when those things are gone, all we'll have is photographs. Those things, those creatures are gone, and it's devastating.
And I think it's Extinction Rebellion. You guys put your bodies on the line. You're willing to be arrested most of the group, and you are one of the groups at the forefront of treating this like an emergency and a catastrophe. And I think that's really very, very important, because as we start talking about it with our friends and as we start living as if it's an emergency and a catastrophe, we start going outside of the mainstream narrative. We are kind of lemmings a little bit. If everybody next door doesn't see that it's really a problem and we're going on with our lives, then you kind of think, well, I guess it's really not that much of a problem. But once groups like yours start to say, no, this is an emergency, we need to start living like it's an emergency, then that ripples out.
That's right. And there's a couple of responses to what you just said, and I want to deal with the first one, which is that only a proportion of people are in a position to get arrested. I'm an elderly, retired white guy with a passport. So, the risks of me getting arrested are minimal. But if you are undocumented, if you've got brown skin, if you're a school teacher, and probably other jobs as well, in New York City, you're not in a position to get arrested easily. So I think it's really important to make that point, that it's a privileged group in society who can put themselves, who can break the law and go to jail without really adverse consequences. So that's the first point I want to make. The second one is that the first demand of Extinction Rebellion is to tell the truth. And this is what we're doing at the moment. And, we got to the point with an enormous amount of work behind the scenes from one of our members, Christina C., to get the New York City Council to declare a state of emergency.
Yes.
As far as we know, that's all that's happened. That's a piece of a bill that can be passed in the City Council, and that's great. But we need to take it a lot further than that, because it's become really clear that the people in New York City do not know anywhere near enough about the magnitude of this crisis that we're facing. And a lot of that can be sheeted back to a really irresponsible media who have not informed the people about what is going on.
Yes, well, they're all owned by corporations who also own other things, like when MSNBC used to be owned by GE and GE made nuclear power plants. How can you trust it?
Well, on that note, I want to make a brief shout out to the New York Times, who have just yesterday declined to co-host the Global Oil and Money Conference, which they've been doing for the last 40 years while maintaining an image of being an impartial news agency.
Wait, I'm sorry, could you say that again? I just want to get the...
will happily say that again.
Yeah.
For the last 40 years, the New York Times has co-hosted the Global Oil and Money Conference, which is effectively a group of oil ministers from the Gulf states and other oil producers and petroleum chief executives meeting to confer on how to more effectively extract fossil fuels and market them.
Okay.
And under pressure...
That's our boo.
Under pressure from Extinction Rebellion, yesterday they've withdrawn from that co-hosting arrangement, and there's a big article in The Guardian about it.
That is fantastic, and I'm really thank you for doing the work that you and the group has done to get that to happen. I know it's so hard to chip away at these things, and I've noticed that the New York Times, on another front, I noticed that the New York Times is doing a lot in their podcasts, in their reporting, to talk about how difficult the reporting is and how the reporters put themselves on the line and how difficult and what they're doing, etc. But if it's the paper of record, and if the paper of record is also, I don't know, I think papers should be responsible to the people as well. Can we have a democratic paper? Oh wait, we have that as a WBAI.
And don't forget The Guardian. They're remarkably good in the way that they present this as an existential crisis and not, as the Times does, just another news story. The Times produces plenty of articles on the climate. There's no question about that. But it's presented alongside, real estate and finance and lifestyles. And
you're going to die. By the way, this dress is terrific. We're speaking with Richard McLachlan on understanding the climate crisis we are in which we're living. He is an Extinction Rebellion member and grandfather of 5. When he saw the success of the Extinction Rebellion in London this past April, he decided to act.
And Richard, I had a chance to meet the members of maybe your newest chapter, the Newark chapter, who were there protesting at the Video Music Awards, the whole crisis that's going on with the water in Newark. So I wanted to ask you, how are you growing, and are you moving into smaller places? New York is a major market. Newark only has New York 12 and the Star Ledger, some people call the Star Liar, and those are the only
Nice.
sources for any climate change at all. So what's going on with Newark, and then also are you growing into other smaller places?
I cannot comment on Newark other than what I've observed, at the action the other day at the Video Music Awards. But what I can say is that we are focusing heavily on neighborhood groups in New York City. So I'm a member of the Flatbush Extinction Rebellion group. There's one in Bushwick, Williamsburg, Park Slope, the Bronx.
Really? You got people in Park Slope to come out of their Wall Street high
These are the leftover
I'm
people.
concerned. Yeah, the leftovers.
Committed and
The ones who
concerned
are in the
people
co-op.
Park Slope,
Yeah.
who also have children and grandchildren potentially. So
That's
yeah,
where I live. I
mean,
just have a
this
slight
is-
negativity toward the.
I know.
what
I could
happened
join
over-
you in all sorts of. But no, I mean, these are the issue is this affects everybody.
Yeah.
We were standing protesting outside the New York Times just the other day, and we had an amazingly large group of NYPD there. Probably more than we were, actually definitely more than we were. And it became really clear to me that the NYPD, the protesters, the people walking up and down the street, the managers in the New York Times building, the chief executives, we are all affected by this. There's no question.
Richard,
about that.
let's get right to the impacts. You gave this talk over the weekend, which we announced last week. So if people wanted to go, heading for extinction and what to do about it, about the impacts of this business as usual on our lives in the forms of fires, the flooding, the heat deaths, the crop failure, the mass movements of people, the warfare. None of these are positive. Can you talk about those things and just give people just exactly what we are staring down the barrel of?
Well, we're staring down the barrel of a global catastrophe. There's absolutely no question about that. I mean, and it gets treated as if it were something in the future. And we're sort of able to do that in New York City because it's not affecting us, right now as we're talking. But as we're talking, there are people pressing up against chain link fences on the southern border of the U.S. who are refugees from a climate disaster in Guatemala, where it's no longer possible to grow crops, where people are living on half a tortilla a day and then desperately heading north to try and escape a completely untenable situation. As we're speaking now, the Bahamas are completely destroyed, and Florida and the Carolinas are facing serious damage as well over the next few days. There are out-of-control fires in parts of Alaska. The Amazon is on fire.
Yes.
I flew, much to my disquiet. I don't feel comfortable flying any longer, but with a family in New Zealand, it's hard to avoid. I flew in late March, over Belarus because the airspace in Pakistan was closed. I was coming from India to Helsinki to visit my son. The whole of Belarus was on fire, and those are the boreal forests burning. This is going on now.
Yes,
There's
well,
no
we have that
question
big
that it sits
Dorian
in the
is.
future.
They always talk about you can't talk about weather as meaning climate change. Did climate change cause this enormous storm? No, but how did climate change increase it? How did climate change make it worse? And that is something you can talk about. The warming oceans causing hurricanes to gain in strength, to have more water to them, and we have seen this over the past number of years. So I love WBAI because you don't have to defend that climate change is a thing. I think we're already all there.
That's great. We are.
Please don't call me if you're not.
Well, one thing I can say is that some time ago, probably 2 months ago, I was sitting in the New York subway in the Q train on my way into the city, and I looked at this subway car full of people and thought, oh my God, I need to tell them about this. And so I went home and I wrote a rather clumsy speech, got back on the subway within 24 hours and stood up. And, I was one of those people that stood up in the subway that people immediately looked down and study their phones very closely. And I yelled out this speech, and nobody told me to shut up. So I kept doing it day after day until I got better at it. And, you know, I have to say that now I developed a flyer that I gave to people. Now I do this talk in the subway, and I hand out flyers, and people want them. I can't print enough flyers that people want to explain these things that you're talking about, which is basically it's still increasing greenhouse gas emissions, oceans warming and expanding, sea levels rising everywhere, you know, polar ice caps melting, glaciers retreating.
It's very
Flooding
difficult to
and
live
drought.
these times. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, oh, I'm throwing out some excess food that looks like it's half gone bad. How many years will it be until I would eat this because we have nothing else? I mean, you know, you know what I mean?
Well, that's right, I do. And crop failure is one of my greatest fears, because very closely on the heels of crop failure comes hunger and social unrest and breakdown.
Well, you already have that in Guatemala, as you said. It's not happening later. It's happening right now. Richard,
That's right.
Richard, there's so much more to talk about, and I would like to have you back on. I'm going to see if you are willing, if Alana will book you again, and then we will get deeper into each of these issues, because it seems like, you know, you could have a 2-hour talk on crop failure, you could have a 2-hour talk on fires, you could have a 2-hour talk on flooding. Just a quick.
Juliana, that's absolutely right. We could.
Thank you so much for being on the program. How can people get involved in Extinction Rebellion if they are interested?
Oh, go to the website, which you can find by XRNYC or X Rebellion. Type in either of those things. There's a web page there with an opportunity to sign up right in front of you. You do that, somebody will contact you, you'll have a welcome call, and you'll be inducted into XR and found a job to do.
Thank you,
because
Richard.
we really need people for October the 7th, our big day in Manhattan.
Oh, well, we need to talk more about that. Okay, you're going to have to come back. Alana's going to get you on.
Yes.
And I do want you to know that you have open airspace here on this show, your group. So if there is something you want covered, please reach out to us, because sometimes things fall through the cracks and we don't want to miss the different things that you are doing. You have our contact information now. We have to go, but thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
You're most welcome, Juliana. I'd be happy to talk again anytime.
Excellent. You are listening to Waking Up. I'm Juliana Forlano.
King Downing, good morning.
We have Jarrett Murphy of Max and Murphy on the program. I want to get, Jarrett, hi. I want to get your theme song so I can play it underneath. Alana, can you get Jarrett's musical theme song so we can play it underneath this thing? So it's not just like, and we're done with that guy. Now, hi, this guy. Jarrett, thanks for coming on the show. What's going on Max and Murphy tonight at 5?
Yes, well, tomorrow is officially the first day of school for most New York City students, and so education is going to be our topic. Obviously, in recent weeks, a lot of focus on the report of the DOE's school diversity advisory group. There's been headlines about the proposal to get rid of gifted and talented. That's really part of a much broader and in some ways even more challenging, more controversial program that they've laid out for attacking the diversity problem in city schools. We'll be talking about all of it with Mark Traeger, who's the City Council's education chairperson, and Matt Gonzalez, formerly of Appleseed, New York City, who was on the advisory council, as well as, of course, listeners' calls. That's today at 5 p.m. right here on WBAI.
Right here on WBAI. Yay. Well, that sounds great. I would like to listen to that, and I look forward to it.
Please do. Call in.
Maybe I will. That's because I have questions. I have questions like, why does my kid have to go to preschool in order to get to college? That seems like it's a crazy town. But anyway, I'm looking forward to the free one that de Blasio has saved us thousands of dollars in childcare.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sure we're not talking about that. Well, maybe. You think so?
I think we're always talking about it in some way or the other. But tune in at 5 and find out.
Thanks, Jared. Appreciate it. The show is Max and Murphy, 5 p.m. on WBAI 99.5 FM, which is what you're listening to right now. Or you can listen online at WBAI.org if, for example, you are doing something at 5 p.m. and you are unable to listen live. It goes the same with our show. You can find it on WBAI.org. Waking Up. We're there all the time. You can also ask Alexa, by the way, if you have an Alexa, you can say, Alexa, play WBAI, and she will just play us live in case, there's more technology through which you can listen. We're online. We're on Alexa. Google's watching us. What do you think, King?
I was wondering what Alexa's pronoun is.
Oh, that's a good. Thank God you don't have to ever use
I know.
it. That's right. What if I just said you can call her? Maybe it's a they.
Well,
We'll ask her. I will ask her when I get home.
Computers are theys, right?
I guess. Or it's. I don't know.
In
It's
a minute,
complicated.
it's going to
I'm
be.
sure
even more
Alana knows about
complicated.
this. She's younger. I'm like, someone tell me what's appropriate that is useful and not hurtful, and I will follow along. Anyway, you're listening to Waking Up. It was a good show. I like this loosey-goosey.
Yeah, we just need a little drama in the morning to kick things off, and then everything just launches.
A little bit of drama. Yeah. And like when the guest doesn't come into the studio, that's drama.
Yeah, that added.
That added a plus. We're still going to publicly shame you. Tomorrow on the program, Jamia Wilson is joining us again. She is one of my favorite guests. So she'll be on, and we'll be here telling you about everything. The weather's nice today. Don't forget to wear your, sunblock, I guess, still, even though it's going to be cloudy. It's going up to 89 degrees, possibly one of our last warm days until, November, when it's again going to be 89 degrees just because of climate catastrophe that we're living under. Dorian is moving toward the northern Florida and, Georgia coastline. That's where it is. It's going pretty slow at this point. They're looking at a potential California landfall. I don't know why it has to be the eye of the storm that makes it consider landfall. To me, if one rain belt hits the shore, that's a landfall. Perhaps not. Anyway, thanks for listening. We appreciate you being here with us today. And I've missed taking your calls, but we had we tried to take your calls.
Yeah, we missed one.
We missed one or two. Put our number in your phone, 212-209-2877. And thanks for listening. Have a great day.